alongside head soccer coach Brian Haddock. John Edwards with you, and coach, another busy week of soccer for the program. And you last week when we talked to you, took on St. Dom's on Thursday, picked up a win against them. Saturday a tough loss to Oakville, and then you played Tuesday night against the Smet. So it's been a busy week for the guys.
Busy week, a lot of action, a lot of different scenarios we were battling in our last 2 or 3 games. And then this week the CBC tournament, like you said, the Smet was a really good game, squandered a lead that we got early, ended up losing that game. Tonight we have CBC, and then MCC opponent SLU on Saturday. To round up the CBC tournament, and we still feel good about ourselves, actually in the tournament, because there's points given for goals, and we got 2 in the first game.
We've talked countless times about how you played at the beginning of the season doesn't necessarily mean doesn't necessarily mean as much as it may be at the end of the season, because everyone makes the postseason. But how much of an advantage for you at this point is to kind of see the ups and downs of what players go through and tough losses, and as the competition changes.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. You would hope that your team's fired up after a loss, but we also look at how we react the day after a big win. We had a couple good wins against St. Dominic's, did well that week. So on the positive side, yeah, we're seeing that in all of our newcomers, some of our returners, some of our guys who are starting this year that didn't get the time last year. So that's the positive. On the negative end, I guess, is that we're still trying to completely play an 80-minute game. That's kind of been the thing. We've had leads in every single game this year except one. And the one lead that we didn't have, it was tied 0-0 in the 85th minute in an OT game against Eureka. So, we look at those sort of stats, and that's a tremendous positive with our schedule to say that we had the lead in every game. On the flip side, we got to close those games down eventually, and that's what we're going to be working on here in the next couple months. Really to build toward the postseason. To play that 80-minute effort, and it might take a while still. It's not going to happen overnight.
How tough is it for teams, especially over the last couple of years, where you've been very senior heavy with your teams? This year, maybe not as much as what it's been over the last couple of years. So how difficult is it for a team to come and create its own identity on a year-by-year basis? Yeah, that's what we're trying to identify that right now. And one thing I could say is that we have to be a team that outworks the opponent. Sometimes there's going to be games when we're not finishing, we're getting chances knocking on the door, it's not going in. And there might be a game where defensively we're just not into it, and we need that offense to succumb 2 goals or 3 goals and put the ball in the back of the net. And we're looking for that person to maybe be that leader both on the offense and defensive end of things. But what we know for sure is that Vianney soccer has got to be a team that outworks you. And that has to be our greatest asset, as it is every year, but especially a year like this year where we're trying to find out who our go-to guys might be. Goal scoring doesn't seem to be an issue for you. You talk about how with the lead you have to close out. How difficult is it when you're playing back-to-back games and you don't really get any days in there to go over some technical stuff? Yeah, as you know, I'm a traditionalist, and I'd rather win all games 1-0, and maybe have a bunch of guys sprinkling 5 or 6 goals. This year, we're putting the ball in the net, at some critical times. And when we're not, though, it seems like we're losing a little bit of focus on the back end of things, and keeping a game at 0-0 and keeping yourself in the game. And maybe if it takes overtime, so be it. If it takes penalty kicks, so be it. And there's just critical moments, the 10-15 minutes maybe in the middle of a second half, where we lose a little bit of focus, and that goes with what you said, the youth, and even some of the seniors maybe that weren't impactful players as juniors. They're on the field a lot, and that's part of the growth of those guys as well, and also a great learning experience for me and our coaches to train these guys, maybe to take the foot off the pedal, so to speak, in our technical training. Albeit, you don't have a lot of those days and weeks like this week, but to use our games as practice mentality, to address at halftime, the importance of playing the ball with the proper foot, the importance of marking, something as simple as that we take for granted, that just needs to be addressed a little bit more. So we use that during the games. As a coach, X's and O's are always important. And it seems that for our program, it always seems like there's less time for the X's and O's. You get those at the very beginning of the year, and then it kind of levels out after you get past the month of September. When you get through the month of September, the schedule kind of levels off a little bit. It's not as compacted. Is it easier to go back to the X's and O's at that point after you've gotten that month of work to say, hey, here's where we've really struggled, here's where we've been really successful, and we really need to work on this over the next couple of weeks?
I think you're right. I think it's a little easier in October because now you've got a month, if not more, of some evidence of how you guys, or how we, operate up by a goal. How do we operate late in the game, tied 0-0 or 1-1. And then one thing we've kind of struggled with is how do you close a 3-1 score as 3-1 and not, let another team back in the game at 3-2. So in the X's and O's in October, we now have evidence, I could foresee that here in a few weeks, of how, how are we working up by a goal, how are we working down by a goal, and to kind of walk through that scenario. Versus in August, you can go over all the X's and O's in the books, but until you see an opponent, until you see your guys against some of our MCC opponents, you really don't know.
Do you get sick of playing the heavy MCC schedule earlier? Is that something that you would rather play those schools maybe 4 times a year and really kind of make it an impactful MCC schedule?
We love playing those opponents. Maybe 4 times is a little too much, but sometimes, ironically, I'm looking back here, in the last 10 or so years and my involvement with our varsity, I think we've seen CBC a couple times, 4 times in a season. You got the tournament, the MCC game, when they were in the CYC tournament, and then in essence, a postseason game. We do like that competition. I think the challenge comes in, when you're playing that team 3 and 4 times and you want to go back to the X's and O's. There's a little chess match going on there when you see somebody so many times and you already have so many kids on the pitch who know each other and 2 coaches who know each other and their tendencies so well. It could be a challenge. But MCC or not, we just love playing quality competition. We love the fact that we've got Oakville on our roster every year, Eureka, Webster Groves, Melville. I mean, the list goes on and on with our public schools, even on the Illinois side, that we're lucky to have. So it goes beyond our MCC teams that we thrive on.
Schedule gets even busier. You have CBC tonight, SLU High, and then next week you actually have some home games finally.
Yeah.
Is it nice after not playing a home game after a while to finally just be able to take a breath and say, wow, we get a chance to play on our home field for a change and have the support? You do have great support from your families that are involved in the soccer program, but isn't it nice just to come home and be like, oh, we get to play in non-heat field again? It
is, and the kids love playing on the heat. There's a level of comfort there, even for us with our pregame prep and meeting in the classroom and locker room and marching out to the field. That's what high school soccer is all about. However, I will say, being on the road as much as we are every year with the 3 tournaments we play in, it really prepares you for the postseason because you don't know what district you're going to be in. You don't know who the host school is. If you're lucky to advance, you don't know what sort of environment you're going to have to be. If you have to travel, is it grass field? Is it turf field? Lights? No lights? There's so many factors, and I really like how our schedule's set up to where we pretty much darn well see every sort of scenario, every sort of opponent. Tough crowds to play in front of. On top of making that 2-day trip to Springfield. And then our away games in the MCC, and you talk about really neat crowds and environments. The MCC road games are also fun as well.
So the heavy beginning of the year where you're away from Don Heap Field. End of the year you go to Springfield, and as we get closer to that because it's coming so quickly. For that trip down to Springfield, talk about the impact that what it has done over the last couple of years for your teams and taking that end of the year kind of getaway for a couple of games and what it does for the team as they get ready for postseason.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but they're already talking about the hotel rooms and who's in whose room and all that sort of stuff, and we're like a month away from the trip, but that's the beauty of it. I mean, we're down there to play soccer, but the bonding and the experience, and we talk about the Vianney soccer experience, that's a really neat part of it that our varsity gets to do, and that's travel for 2 days to Missouri State, to Springfield to play Glendale and Ozark, and we get a lot of guys. The hidden gem behind all this are all the guys that go to school there. Even as recent as last year's 2018, 2019 class that are going to come back and visit. You know, we get a lot of alumni, we get a lot of alumni parents who are there visiting their sons who come to our game. And it is just a phenomenal bonding experience with that bus trip, you know, the hotel, and hopefully, you know, we play well, but that's, you know, really secondary to why we're going to that.
Coach, I always appreciate a few minutes of your time, and we look forward to seeing you finally here back at Don Heed Field next week. We'll have those games live streamed for you next Tuesday and Thursday against the Smet and SLU High. Until then, we'll talk to you next week.